What's up, everybody? Welcome back to part 2 of the Thomas Take Sports Podcast today, February 22nd. Very excited to get off to this part 2 of the podcast today. In case you haven't heard, I will be commentating mixed martial arts action in Western New York, specifically in Batavia, New York, at Quality Inn Suites, where we will have ground force fights to absolute mayhem, 4 title fights. Very excited about that opportunity to be able to commentate a sport that I really enjoy being a part of, that I'm going to really enjoy being a part of in any capacity. I've always wanted to be a part of it in any capacity, and I'm very excited to have that opportunity. So it's at Quality Inn Suites in Batavia, New York. Tickets are on sale now. Feel free to contact me for ticket info. Tickets are going fast. Doors open at 5. Fights start at 6. So 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Again, that's in Batavia, New York. Quality Inn Suites. So for all the local people that listen to my podcast, that is something that you would want to get your tickets for. It's a great event. 4 title fights, amateur mixed martial arts in the state of New York. Really great fights on that card. I'm excited. A lot of opportunity for young fighters to have a chance to be seen and exposed to the public. Like David the Villain Whitman, Caitlin DeCourcy, great action, between male divisions and female divisions. So that being said, this is my UFC 209 preview and prediction podcast episode. Very excited about UFC 209, March 4th on pay-per-view, the UFC event, the next UFC event, where Tyron Woodley will attempt, to defend his UFC title against Stephen Wonderboy Thompson for the second time. These guys both previously fought at UFC 209. It was a draw in which Tyron Woodley was able to defend his belt, being that he's the champion. Anytime there's a draw, the champion gets to keep his belt. So they're looking to rectify that, redeem themselves, both Stephen Thompson and Tyron Woodley, and trying to fight again, getting that second opportunity to put a finish on it with authority, an affirmative finish on the fight this time around. It'll be very interesting. The first fight, Tyron Woodley was able to land really hard punches on Stephen Thompson, but I don't really feel like he wrestled enough. If he would have wrestled a little bit more, maintained top position, I think he could have eked out a decision there and defended his belt with authority. Stephen Thompson really had a remarkable turnaround. He was rocked in that fight, came back, actually finished that round on top, landing blows to Tyron Woodley. That fifth and final round, it was tied in my eyes on my scorecards heading into that fifth and final round. Had Stephen Thompson put his foot on the gas just a little bit, I really feel he could have won that fight. So it was such a close fight. It deservedly so was scored a draw, and I'm happy that the UFC is doing this as an immediate rematch. It really needed to be an immediate rematch. Wonderboy deserved that second chance to get this fight. Anytime a fight is a draw, you have to redo it immediately, especially one that's a title fight. So you got to do it again. So how do I see the fight going down? If Stephen Thompson can maintain distance, keep his range with his kicks, land punches from odd angles like he has in fights past, versus Rory McDonald and Johnny Hendricks specifically, I think Wonderboy can win this fight. If Tyron Woodley is able to land the power punches that he's landed time and time again over the span of his career, like he did against Robbie Lawler, then obviously that fight will end quickly. But I don't think he'll be able to. Thompson was caught once in that fight, but he was able to bounce back. His durability is very underrated. Most people see him as just a kickboxer. I see him as a tough, athletic specimen in the cage. And I think if Tyron Woodley is able to land, hard punches, he needs to look to take Stephen Thompson down. He needs to look to grind him out, wear him down, and eke out the decision. I think that's the only way, because after the first round or two, Tyron Woodley is a little tired. He carries around a lot of muscle. He throws very hard punches from the early onset of the fight. He went the full 5 rounds with Thompson this past time, but it was close. I would try to wear Thompson down, land punches from top position if I were Tyron Woodley, and look to actually finish the fight from the top if possible. Any chance that he could finish the fight from the top position, I would look to finish the fight there if I was Tyron Woodley. Who do I think is going to win the fight? That's the real question. If I was a betting man, I would probably bet on Tyron Woodley, being the fact that he feels like he has a point to prove. He doesn't feel respected by the UFC. Feels like he's been the worst treated UFC champion of all time. I don't know about that. I think that that's all hoopla. He feels like it has something to do with his race, being that he's an African-American man. I don't know if that's the case. John Jones, Daniel Cormier, two guys that are heavily promoted by the UFC, both African-American fighters, Anthony Johnson, Rashad Evans, Anderson Silva. So there's been guys along the way, Kevin Randleman, guys along the way, just name dropping, that were heavily promoted by the UFC. And they were guys that, the UFC promoted heavily, and I don't think that that's the case with Tyron Woodley. I think Tyron Woodley kind of shoots himself in the foot making statements like that. It defeats the purpose of him wanting to be appreciated by fans when he bashes how the fans treat him, when really the fans don't treat him in any way. He just kind of goes into Twitter wars with fans on silly subjects. So, I would bet on Tyron Woodley. I think Stephen Thompson learned a lot from that first fight, though. I think that he's working hard at making the adjustments that he needs to make in order to come to a different conclusion for this fight. But I would pick Woodley if I had to pick. I'd pick Woodley again, winning the rematch. The co-main event is Khabib Nurmagomedov versus Tony Ferguson, a fight that's 2-3 years in the making. Nurmagomedov is 24-0. Tony Ferguson is on a 9-fight win streak. So this is a fight that has needed to happen for quite some time in the UFC's lightweight division, now more than ever, now that Conor McGregor is lobbying to fight Floyd Mayweather in a boxing match and is taking a break due to the pregnancy of his girlfriend. He's on maternity leave. So the winner of this fight will be the UFC interim lightweight title in the event that Conor does not return to the UFC. That is an underlier. That is why this fight is a UFC interim fight. Interim title fight, I should say. This fight is made, these fights are made, the interim title fights are made in the event that the champion is gone for a long period of time. And that was the case when Conor was the champion at 145. He did the Nate Diaz experiment. He did the lightweight title shot against Alvarez. He was not returning to the UFC featherweight division. He can say all he wants that he was going to, but if he was going to, he would have fought Aldo again immediately after that first fight, after that 13-second fight, and he did not. So they made the UFC interim fight for the featherweight title with Aldo and Edgar. Then they made the UFC interim title fight with Holloway and Pettis, promoting Jose Aldo from the interim champion to the featherweight champion, stripping Conor McGregor of his featherweight title a mere 18 days into his tenure as the dual champion. It has faced some public criticism, but in the defense of the UFC, Conor McGregor wasn't going to fight at featherweight anytime soon, especially when he was on maternity leave. So you would have counted on Conor McGregor to defend that featherweight title 2 years after the fact he won it. It just held up the division. MMA is not boxing. It needs a constant flow within the divisions in order to maintain some legitimacy. So that is that in the featherweight division. Now he's on maternity leave in the lightweight division, and they needed to make a title fight. There had to be something on the line for this fight. These fighters are two of the best fighters in the world at 155 pounds, so something needed to be on the line in the event that Conor takes longer than anticipated to return. And that's what we have here with Khabib Nurmagomedov. Now, Khabib is undefeated, as I stated. He's suffered through devastating injuries time and time again in his UFC career. And I don't know, I know that he's one of the best fighters in the world, but that inactivity does worry me. He did fight Michael Johnson. Michael Johnson was able to land hard punches on the feet in that fight, but Khabib then, began to ragdoll him and throw him to the ground and do what Khabib Nurmagomedov does, just taking it to another level in the wrestling department. And I anticipate that that's what he will try to do to Tony Ferguson. Tony Ferguson is a tough, durable fighter, guy that really throws punches at awkward angles, but they're really precise, accurate punches. And he has an awkward style. He's fast. He's in and out. Throws long punches. He reminds me a lot of Nate Diaz, but a faster, more athletic version of Nate Diaz. With great Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He's finished some fights from really awkward positions. He finished a fight in The Ultimate Fighter, a season in which he won with an up kick while he was on his back. He has a very rare, funky style that causes problems for a lot of fighters. You saw his last fight versus Rafael dos Anjos. He made Rafael dos Anjos really second-guess himself virtually in the entire fight. It was a huge win for his career and a huge win to springboard him into this fight with Khabib Nurmagomedov. And that's the fight we're going to get. If I were to pick between these two guys, this is probably the toughest fight in which I'll have to pick, a winner for throughout the entire year. This is a fight that is needed to take place for quite some time. Both guys are talented. Both guys are durable fighters. I would go with Khabib due to the wrestling advantage that he has, due to the cardio that he has. He's just on. He puts fighters in his territory. He makes them swim in deep water. He's done it time and time again over the span of his career. That is why he is undefeated. I would have to go with Khabib Nurmagomedov. Regardless, these two fights are great. It's a great main event and co-main event for the UFC. This is probably the best UFC pay-per-view that the UFC has put on since UFC 207, easily. And UFC 207 had a great night of fights with the main event and co-main event, Amanda Nunes' destruction of Ronda Rousey, and then you had Cody Garbrandt seizing the moment versus Dominic Cruz. Since then, the UFC hasn't really had a good pay-per-view. There's only been one, obviously, but even the events within there with the fight night, they've been okay. The UFC really needs this pay-per-view to do well, and it could determine who George St. Pierre fights next in his return. If Tyron Woodley wins, we could see GSP face Woodley. If Wonder Boy wins, Wonder Boy is going to be the champion, and they'll probably do a Part 3 fight between Woodley and Thompson. I highly doubt that GSP will go back to welterweight regardless. I think he's going to go to middleweight. I think he's going to fight Michael Bisping for the middleweight strap, and then try to defend it from there if he's able to win it. That's a fight that sells itself. March is 1 month away from the UFC 210 in Buffalo. I'll be there. I can't wait. I'm very excited to be going. Very excited to be going to Joe Rogan as well. I'm excited to see him in stand-up. I love stand-up comedy. It's something that I've always wanted to try. I have a few bits that I've written over the last few years that I think I would like that. That's my pitch. Could I somehow get a stand-up comedy gig? That'd be awesome. I think I do really well. I really do. I'm good speaking in public. That's partially why I can do this podcast and many other things that I do. Check me out. Thomas Takes Sports Podcast. This is the Facebook page. I'm also on Bills Fanatics. I've posted live videos pertaining to the 2017 Buffalo Bills offseason, what they should do, what they shouldn't do, putting all options on the table for the Buffalo Bills. Any and all options are on the table for them this season, this offseason. So tune in, and thank you guys for tuning in to Part 2 of the Thomas Take. Part 3 coming up next. I'm going to recap the action at Bellator 172, the main event that never was, Fedor versus Matt Mitrione. Stay tuned.